Chapter 24. Erica bolted into the den, sputtering angrily. "Luke, what are you doing here?" she demanded. Startled, Luke took a step back from the desk, his face bright red. "Hi, Erica. What are you doing here?" Erica repeated, stopping a few feet in front of him, glaring at him, her fists angrily pushed against her hips. "Sorry," Luke muttered uncomfortably. "I was just leaving a valentine for Rachel." He held up the square white envelope he had in his right hand. "Huh? A valentine?" Erica lowered her eyes to the card. "But why did you sneak in?" I didn't want to disturb anyone," Luke explained, his face still scarlet, his expression guilty, embarrassed. I saw you studying so hard and I guessed Rachel was asleep, so I was just going to leave this and scoot." Erica studied his face, trying to determine if he was telling the truth. "You scared me to death," she said, exhaling loudly. "If I was a cat, that would have been all 9 lives. "Sorry," Luke repeated softly. "I didn't mean to. Really." "You feel guilty, don't you?" Erica accused, crossing her arms in front of her chest, locking her eyes on his. "Huh? Guilty?" "Yeah." She refused to soften her gaze, even though he looked away. "Guilty. Guilty about Rachel." "Give me a break, Erica," Luke said, pleading. "Do you know what happened to Rachel after you stopped coming? Do you have any idea how devastated she was?" Erica cried. "I can't talk about it," Luke stammered. "I still care about Rachel, but I'm with Melissa now. Here." He tossed the valentine at Erica and ran past her out of the den, into the hall, and out of the house without looking back once. Across the street, Melissa was playing perhaps the most boring game of Scrabble in the history of the universe. "Daddy, can't we quit?" she begged. "You're ahead by 400 points because I've had nothing but vowels the whole night." Mr. Davis chuckled, leaning over the table, his eyes lowered to his line of letters. "That's not why you're losing, Beanpole. You're losing because I'm a good defensive player. You have to have a strong defense in Scrabble. Most people don't know that." "Don't call me Beanpole," Melissa grumbled. "You know I hate it." She shoved her letters around on the holder, frowning. "Want me to call you Fatso?" Mr. Davis raised his head abruptly. "Don't you dare." He was a big bear of a man, weighing around 200 pounds, and was very sensitive about his weight. "I can't make a word," Melissa wailed. "All I have are O's and U's." Mr. Davis glanced at the score sheet. "Okay, Melissa, we can quit. You always were a poor loser," he teased. Melissa uttered a cry of frustration and shoved the board across the table, causing the pieces to tumble out of place. "Loser cleans up," her father declared, grinning. "I'm going to watch the news. It's nearly 11. He pushed himself away from the kitchen table and, after stopping at the refrigerator for a snack, headed into the den to join Melissa's mom. Grumbling to herself, Melissa cleaned up the game, then headed up to her room. 2 hours later, she was still struggling to fall asleep. Forcing her eyes to remain closed, she tried to think pleasant, soothing thoughts. She pictured Luke, his shy smile, the way his light brown hair curled just above his ears, how cute he looked in his silver-framed glasses. She tried counting sheep, fluffy, white, 4-legged cotton balls. She pictured them hopping over a low fence, just like in the cartoons. Whoever thought up counting sheep as a way to get to sleep, she wondered. What a dumb idea. Did it ever work? She tried counting puppy dogs. Then she tried to clear all the animals out of her mind and concentrate on nothing at all. Sheer nothingness. Clear, white nothingness. Soft nothingness. She had just about drifted off to sleep when she heard a loud thump outside her window. "Huh?" She sat up, instantly alert. "Hey! Am I asleep? Am I dreaming?" Melissa asked herself uncertainly. No. Someone was there, outside her window, balanced on a tree limb. Gaping in fright, Melissa could see someone out there, blocking the light from the street lamp, arms at the sides of her window. "Who's there? What's happening?" She tried to move, tried to scramble out of bed, but fear had paralyzed her. She could only raise her hands to her face. Then her window was pulled open. A dark figure dropped into her room with a groan, landing heavily on the carpet. "Oh!" Melissa opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. He advanced toward her, arms stiff at his sides, a shadow moving in shadows. As he came near, his face loomed out of the darkness. His eyes were cold, his features set. "Dave!" Melissa cried in a tight, frightened voice. "Dave, stop! What are you doing?" Chapter 25. Breathing hard, Dave stopped beside Melissa's bed. His dark eyes glared down at her. In the dim light from the window, she could see that he was even thinner, his scraggly hair falling past his shoulders now. "Melissa," he whispered, still trying to catch his breath. "You look so scared." Yes?" she stammered, finally finding her voice. She gripped the covers and pulled them up to her shoulders. "So you think I'm guilty, too," he said, his voice filled with menace and disappointment. "No, Dave." "That's why you're scared, huh?" he asked, leaning over her, so close she could smell onions on his breath. "You're scared of me because you think I killed Josie?" "No," Melissa replied angrily. "I'm scared because you broke into my house. I'm scared because you climbed in my window like a burglar or something." He snickered. "Sorry." Melissa climbed out of bed and crossed the room to her closet, keeping her eyes on Dave. Feeling around in the dark closet, she found her robe and pulled it on, struggling with one sleeve. "Why'd you climb in here like that, Dave? What are you doing?" she demanded, clicking on the ceiling light. They both blinked under the sudden brightness. Dave looked terrible, she saw. His eyes were red-rimmed, with dark circles under them. His hair was greasy and disheveled, his sweater and jeans wrinkled and filthy. "I always wondered if you believed me," he said, ignoring her questions. "I always wondered if you thought I killed Josie, if you thought I stabbed Erica. You said you believed me, but I always wondered." "I did believe you," Melissa insisted, keeping her back against the wall, edging nervously toward the doorway. "You know I believed you." "I don't know what I know," he said bitterly. "Dave, what are you doing here now? What do you want?" "I just happened to be in the neighborhood," he replied, snickering at his own joke. He dropped down wearily on the edge of her bed and wiped his forehead with the dirty sleeve of his sweater. "That tree isn't easy to climb," he muttered. "Dave, why did you run away from school? Your mother called me. She did." He slapped his forehead. "She spoiled my surprise?" Melissa groaned impatiently. "Dave, she sounded very worried about you. Very frightened." "You know Mom," he replied dryly, rolling his eyes. "Dave, why?" Melissa insisted. "Why'd you come back?" Okay, I'll tell you why I'm here," he said, suddenly turning serious. "I didn't come here to scare you, Melissa. I've missed you, you know." "I've missed you too," Melissa said awkwardly, leaning back against the wall, relaxing a little and sighing. "I heard about you and Luke," Dave said flatly, without any expression at all. "Well, I was kind of surprised," he said, his cheeks flushing pink. "Me too," Melissa confessed. "But you didn't come here because of Luke, did you?" "I think I know who the real killer is," he said abruptly, staring up at her, his dark eyes flashing to life. "I've had so much time to figure it out, so much time to think about it. I can't get it out of my mind. I'm obsessed with clearing my name, with finding the real killer." "That's why you've come back to Shadyside?" Melissa asked. He nodded. "To prove that I'm not a killer. I want to prove it to you, to everybody." "Then why did you send me those disgusting valentines?" Melissa snapped, the words bursting angrily from her. "Huh?" He jumped to his feet in surprise. "What valentines? What are you talking about?" "Don't act innocent," Melissa said sharply. "You know what valentines. The ones with the ugly threats, just like you sent to Josie." "Huh?" He scratched his greasy hair, his eyes studying her face. "Melissa, you don't think that I—" "Come off it, Dave," Melissa shouted. "You sent them to me. They're in your handwriting." "Get real," he muttered, shaking his head. "You're messed up. Really." She glared at him angrily, but didn't reply, waiting for him to drop the innocent act and confess. "Show them to me," he demanded. "Get them. I want to see." "Fine. Here." She pulled open the top drawer of her desk, grabbed the two valentines, and tossed them at him. They fell to the floor beside his muddy sneakers. He bent to pick them up. Then, holding them close to his face, he examined them carefully, reading each one again and again, squinting as he studied the handwriting. When he finally finished and set the cards down on the bed, Melissa saw that he was breathing heavily, his eyes glowing with excitement. "Now I know who the killer is," he exclaimed, leaping to his feet. "Who?" Melissa demanded. He didn't seem to hear her. Lost in his own thoughts, he hurried to the open window and pulled his knees onto the windowsill as he reached for the tree branch. "Who?" Melissa repeated. "Who is it, Dave? Tell me." Without replying, without a goodbye, he dropped out of view, scrambling down the tree trunk. "Who is it? Who?" she called after him, leaning out into the cold, still night. But he had disappeared into the darkness. Chapter 26. Where is Erica? Rachel asked. Melissa took Rachel's hand and led her down the driveway. Erica is at school, she replied. She had to stay late today. She's rehearsing a play. She asked me to take care of you. I go to school too, Rachel said, smiling. It's such a pretty day, Melissa said, holding Rachel's hand as they walked. I thought it might be nice to take a walk. I'm very smart in my school, Rachel said proudly. The late afternoon sun, still high over the winter-bare trees, felt surprisingly warm, the soft breeze more like spring than early February. Abruptly, Rachel pulled her hand out of Melissa's. I can go outside by myself, she said crossly. Melissa smiled at her, concealing her surprise at Rachel's sudden anger. Really? Do you go out by yourself a lot? Rachel didn't reply for a long while. They descended the driveway and turned right, walking up Fear Street, which was silent and deserted except for the excited cries of a group of children playing some kind of game in a backyard down the block. I can, Rachel insisted suddenly. I can go outside by myself. That's nice, Melissa told her, as a wave of sadness swept over her. Poor Rachel, she thought. She used to be so terrific, really popular, smart, a great student, a great friend. She was still beautiful, though, as beautiful as any fashion model, but there was something missing behind her eyes. She became more and more like a dreamy child. Oh, look, Rachel cried suddenly. Wait, Melissa called. Rachel ignored her and ran full speed toward a big mound of dead brown leaves near the curb. Laughing gleefully, Rachel dove into the pile, thrashing her arms wildly as if swimming in them. Melissa had to laugh, watching Rachel's innocent joy. Flopping around in the leaf pile, Rachel was having the time of her life. It was so sad, so tragic, and so touching all at the same time. Hey, Rachel, make room, Melissa cried. She took a running dive into the pile, too. Rachel laughed gleefully. The two of them had a rousing leaf fight, rolling around, tossing handfuls of leaves, laughing together. About half an hour later, Melissa and Rachel were in the front yard playing catch with a large rubber ball when Erica arrived. Hey, what's going on? She asked Melissa, surprised to find them outdoors. It was such a pretty day, Melissa said, smiling. Rachel and I have been having fun. You have to watch her really carefully outdoors, Erica said nervously. I can go outside by myself, Rachel insisted. No, you can't, Erica scolded. You have to wait for someone to take you outside, remember? Rachel frowned and didn't reply. She dropped the ball to the ground and kicked it toward the house. It was nice of you to watch her so I could go to rehearsal, Erica told Melissa. I hope she wasn't too much trouble. No trouble at all, Melissa replied. Then she added, I saw Dave last night. Erica paled at the sound of his name. She raised her eyes to Melissa's, her expression troubled. What did he say? What did he want? He says he knows who killed Josie, Melissa told her. He's come back to clear his name. Who? Erica demanded eagerly. Who killed Josie? Who? Who stabbed me? Melissa frowned. He wouldn't say. He just said he knew. Rachel laughed suddenly, a loud, mocking laugh. Someone hates Erica, she sang. Then she began to chant it over and over. Someone hates Erica. Someone hates Erica. Come on, Erica said, putting an arm gently around Rachel's slender shoulders. Let's get you inside. Say goodbye to Melissa. Melissa called goodbye, then turned and jogged across the street to her house. The sun was a glowing red ball now, lowering itself behind the trees. The air had taken on an evening chill. Hey! She was startled to find Luke coming around the side of the house. Hi, he said somewhat shyly. Hi, she repeated, staring at him curiously. What a nice surprise. Well, yeah, it's a surprise for me too, he said, an odd grin spreading across his face. His glasses glinted, catching the red glow of the sun. Guess what I did? She stopped and stared at him. You won the lottery? He laughed dryly. Guess again. I can't guess. Why do you look so sheepish? I locked myself out, he explained with a shrug. I must have left my keys in school or something. He rolled his eyes. Dumb or what? I couldn't get into my house, so I came over here. Well, I'm glad you're dumb, she replied, grinning. I've been taking care of Rachel. Now I guess I'll have to take care of you. She reached into her coat pocket for her keys. Not finding them, she reached into her other pocket. Then a disconcerted look formed on her face as she searched her jeans pockets. Guess what? She wailed, holding up her empty hands. No keys. I'm dumb too. We're both dumb, Luke agreed, smiling. Come here, dummy. Melissa put her arms around his neck and gave him a long, enthusiastic kiss. We make a good team, she said, leaning against his chest. She kissed him again, wrapping her arms around his waist. When the kiss ended, she raised her eyes to his. You know, I really do think we make a good team, she said seriously. Melissa felt very happy, but to her surprise, Luke seemed very embarrassed and more than a little troubled. A little after 11 that night, Melissa was studying up in her room, hunched over her desk, the small desk lamp casting a circle of light onto her open textbook. She struggled to concentrate. She yawned and rubbed her eyes. She stretched her arms high over her head. Then she heard sounds down in the front yard. A thud, followed by rapid footsteps, followed by the clang of a metal garbage can toppling over onto the drive. Startled, Melissa leapt to her feet, knocking over the desk chair as she scrambled to the window. Is it Dave again? That was her first thought. Is he climbing up to my room again? Has he fallen out of the tree? It was such a warm night, she had left her bedroom window open. Tingling with fear, Melissa peered out. The roof over the porch blocked her view of the driveway, but she could see a figure running away from the house, running toward the street. Who is that? Melissa cried out loud, squinting into the darkness. Melissa couldn't see the face of the girl running across her front yard. All she could see was the long, red hair trailing behind her. Chapter 27. I don't believe it, Melissa muttered, squinting against the darkness. She heard a car roar away, its tires squealing. I saw Rachel, she told herself, the night air cold against her hot cheeks. I saw Rachel running across the yard. But that's impossible. And whose car sped away? Did Rachel get into it? Rachel can't drive. And why would Rachel drive anyway? She lives right across the street. Feeling confused and upset, Melissa moved away from the window. Her heart was pounding. She suddenly felt chilled all over. Rachel? Running outdoors? By herself in the middle of the night? As she pulled on her robe, Melissa realized that her parents were awake. Melissa! Her father's heavy footsteps thundered in the hallway. Melissa, are you all right? He poked his head into her room, the door swinging open, the yellow hall light revealing him in pajama bottoms, his hair disheveled, his expression worried. Are you okay? He asked, surprised to find her standing by her closet. I heard a prowler. I called the police. I heard it too, Melissa told him. She started to tell him that she saw Rachel running across the yard, but he was already halfway down the stairs. Melissa tied her robe and headed to the stairway, nearly colliding with her mother on the stairs. Your father called the police, she told Melissa, flashing a tense frown at her daughter. They hurried down the stairs. The living room lights had been turned on. The hall and kitchen were also lit up. Mr. Davis had turned on all the lights in the house. The doors are locked, he called to them, sounding bewildered. No sign of a break-in. Then what on earth? Mrs. Davis started, following his voice to the kitchen. Melissa's father was peering out the kitchen window at the garage. Everything looks normal out there, he reported. Garage door is closed. Shivering, Mrs. Davis wrapped her arms around herself. Weird, she muttered. I saw Rachel McLean outside, Melissa finally managed to say. Both her parents turned to stare at her, squinting in disbelief. What did you just say? Mr. Davis asked, scratching his head. I saw her. I saw Rachel. She was running across the yard, Melissa insisted. But that's impossible, her mother said quickly, still hugging herself. Mr. Davis stepped behind his wife and put an arm around her shoulders. You must have been dreaming, he told Melissa, staring hard at her. But I saw her, Melissa said shrilly. I heard a noise, a crash. I ran to the window and... But Rachel isn't allowed outside by herself, Mrs. Davis said. She can't go outside by herself. What would Rachel be doing in our yard? Mr. Davis added. He shook his head. Come on, Melissa. Melissa angrily pounded her fist on the kitchen counter. I'm not crazy, she shouted. I saw Rachel out there. They didn't have any time to discuss it further. A loud knocking on the front door startled them all. Melissa got to the front door first. Who is it? She called timidly. Police, replied a deep voice on the other side of the door. Melissa pulled the door open to reveal two solemn-faced police officers. She stared at them in the harsh porch light. One was heavy, bald, and paunchy, with an enormous, lumpy nose that resembled a potato. His partner was young and blonde. Melissa pushed open the storm door. The two officers stepped past her into the hallway. I called you because, Mr. Davis started, stepping between Melissa and her mother. When did you discover the body? The older policeman interrupted. What? Mr. Davis asked, terribly confused. When did you discover the body? The policeman repeated patiently in a low, steady voice. What body? Mrs. Davis asked, as bewildered as her husband. The body of the teenage boy on your driveway, the officer replied. No! The scream burst from Melissa, more a shriek of horror than a word. No, not Luke. Please, don't let it be Luke. Chapter 28. Erica yawned loudly as she pulled back the bed covers. She glanced at the clock beside her bed. I'm so tired. It's so late, she thought. I'll never be able to get up in time for school tomorrow. Straightening the hem of her nightshirt, she eased herself into bed. The sheets felt cool. She knew she'd be able to fall asleep quickly. She had nearly drifted off when the crackling of the intercom on the wall startled her awake. She sat up, immediately alert. Erica? Rachel's voice broke through the late-night silence. Rachel sounds wide awake, Erica thought. What is she doing up at this hour? Erica, please come brush my hair. Doesn't she have any idea how late it is? Erica wondered, rolling her eyes in exasperation. No, of course she doesn't. But why is she awake? Erica, please come brush my hair, Rachel repeated. Erica groaned and climbed to her feet. I'm coming, Rachel, she called into the intercom. Yawning, she wearily made her way down the narrow hall to Rachel's room. Rachel was sitting up in bed, the bedside lamp on. She smiled as Erica entered. The soft light made Rachel's hair gleam. Brush out my hair? Rachel asked. Rachel, it's so late, Erica moaned, yawning into her hand. I'm not sleepy, Rachel replied. But I am, Erica protested. Brush my hair, just for a short while. Erica moaned again, but picked up the hairbrush and climbed onto the bed on her knees beside Rachel. Why aren't you sleepy? She asked as she started to brush with long, slow strokes. I'm just not, Rachel replied brightly. I'm wide awake. You may be wide awake now, but you're going to be exhausted tomorrow, Erica said wearily. She was so tired, it took a supreme effort to raise the hairbrush to Rachel's hair. The front doorbell rang. Huh? Erica cried out in surprise, dropping the brush. More, Rachel urged. Brush some more. I can't. I'll be right back, Erica said, climbing off the bed. There's someone at the door. Hurry back, Rachel instructed. Erica's mother, wrapping a heavy wool sweater around her nightgown, was already at the front door when Erica got downstairs. Who can it be at this hour? She asked, hesitating with her hand on the doorknob. Erica shrugged. Rachel is awake, she told her mother. Strange night, huh? Oh! Mrs. McLean uttered a soft cry of surprise as she pulled the door open and saw the two police officers. Mrs. McLean? The older, heavy-set one asked, narrowing his eyes to peer into the entryway. Yes, Mrs. McLean replied, her expression changing from surprise to fear. She pulled the sweater tighter around her shoulders. We need to speak to your daughter, he said. She's right here, Mrs. McLean said, flashing Erica a bewildered glance. She opened the glass storm door to allow the men to enter. They ducked their heads as they came into the entryway, even though the ceiling was high. Are you Rachel McLean? The older officer asked Erica. Huh? No, Erica replied, surprised. Rachel is my sister. She motioned up the stairs. We need to talk to your sister, Rachel, the officer said softly, raising his eyes to the stairway. But why? Mrs. McLean demanded, pushing back a strand of hair that had fallen over her forehead. Well, the officer hesitated and glanced at his partner. The younger man cleared his throat but didn't say anything. Well, the older one started again. We need to talk to Rachel in connection with the death this evening of a young man named, he checked his notepad, Dave Kinley. Dave, Erica cried. Dead? How? I don't believe it. She covered her face with her hands and slumped down to sit on the bottom step. Are you okay, miss? The younger officer asked, bending over her. Dave, Erica cried. Dave is dead? I'm sorry, the older man said softly. I didn't mean to shock you. I don't know how else to tell you. How awful, Mrs. McLean said. shaking her head, her voice a hushed whisper. How awful. Slumped on the bottom stair, Erica's hands remained over her face. How? She asked weakly. What happened? We found him across the street, the policeman offered, in the Davises' driveway, beside the front porch. He glanced at his pad. The victim was stabbed to death. Very recently, we think. Our investigators are on their way. Stabbed! Erica let out a terrified cry. She lowered her hands. Her face was bright red. Stabbed? Just like my sister Josie? Just like me? Her mother leaned over and placed both hands comfortingly on her shoulders. May I talk to your daughter Rachel? The younger officer, shifting his weight uncomfortably, asked Mrs. McLean. Rachel? Why Rachel? Mrs. McLean demanded, holding on to Erica, who was trembling and shaking her head. Someone fitting her description was observed fleeing the Davises' yard. That's impossible, Erica cried. Mrs. McLean's expression hardened. She clenched her jaw. You've made a mistake, she said firmly. My daughter could not have been the one. We need to talk to her for just a minute, the officer said, returning Mrs. McLean's stare. My daughter was in an accident, Mrs. McLean told them, her voice quivering. Her brain was damaged. She cannot leave the house by herself. She must always be watched. I'm sorry to insist, the older officer said softly, but we have to talk to Rachel. We'll keep it very brief. Could you wake her for us? She's awake, Erica said, climbing to her feet. You're wasting your time, Mrs. McLean insisted. Rachel was not out of this house. Rachel couldn't stab anyone. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding, the man said. Erica started up the stairs, followed by her mother, followed by the two officers. The stairs creaked noisily under all their weight. Rachel was still sitting up in her bed, the covers up to her waist, her red hair falling softly against the headboard. Hi, she said brightly as the two officers stepped into the room. This is my daughter Rachel, Mrs. McLean told them, hurrying to Rachel's side and putting a hand on her slender shoulder. My sister has to be watched, Erica said, walking to the opposite side of the bed. She cannot go out by herself. Yes, I can, Rachel protested, smiling at the two police officers. I go out all the time. Chapter 29. Erica, hi. How are you feeling? Erica made her way around a group of laughing kids and walked over to Melissa's locker. It was a few days later, Friday after school, and the hall was clearing out quickly. I'm better, Erica said, adjusting her backpack. I had a couple of bad days, she admitted, lowering her eyes to the floor. The doctor made me stay home. It was all such a shock, the news about Dave, the police suspecting Rachel. It was all so upsetting. Have the police come up with a lead? Melissa asked, leaning back against the locker. Anything at all? I don't think so, Erica told her, sighing. Of course, after they talked to Rachel for a few minutes, they realized that she couldn't have killed Dave. They realized immediately. Her voice trailed off sadly. She chewed hard on her bubble gum. I can't believe they haven't turned up anything, Melissa said, tugging nervously at a strand of her hair. It's so horrible. Right in my driveway. I just don't know what to think. She took a deep breath and lowered her hand. Where are you headed? Guys and Dolls rehearsal, Erica replied. I tried out for Adelaide, but I didn't get it. She sighed. But at least I'm in the chorus. Are you going to the skating party on the lake Sunday night? Yeah, Melissa nodded. I don't really feel in a partying mood. But Luke is insisting we go. He says otherwise we'll just sit around and be morbid. Morbid? Erica repeated the word, frowning. Yeah, morbid. I'm going too. Oh yeah? Melissa replied, pushing herself away from the locker, standing up straight. Who's your date? Erica made a face. I don't have one. I just thought I'd go to get out of the house. It's pretty morbid at my house too, you know. A dry, mirthless laugh escaped her lips. Got to run. I'm already late. Melissa watched Erica hurry down the long corridor. Poor kid. She doesn't have it easy, Melissa thought. Josie's face flashed into her mind. It would be so horrible to lose a sister, Melissa thought with a shudder. So horrible to have a sister murdered. One sister murdered. One sister stabbed. One sister's life ruined forever by a stupid accident. The McLeans don't have it easy, Melissa realized. Poor Erica. She turned to her locker and began to spin the lock. Finishing the combination, she lifted up on the handle and pulled the door open, and uttered a startled cry. Oh no. On the inside of the locker door Someone had painted a large, broken Valentine heart. Smeared dots of bright red blood dripped from the heart. Scrawled in thick red paint at the bottom were the words, "You're dead."